What if the most haunting stories of World War II were never in your textbooks? Never taught, never told, and deliberately buried. These aren't tales of generals and battles you've heard before. These are operations so secret, so morally disturbing, they were erased from history's pages, until now. Step carefully. What you're about to uncover was never meant to see the light. The frost crept along the windowpane of a crumbling tenement building in the Czerniaków district of Warsaw, where ash from burned documents and rubble dust mingled in the bitter December air of 1942. Inside the apartment, 5 men and 2 women sat crowded around a battered table. Their breath steamed in the cold as fingers wrapped in cloth gloves manipulated pencils and cipher sheets with meticulous urgency. Above them, a cracked ceiling bulged ominously from bomb damage, yet their eyes never left the rows of letters and numbers before them. They were known only as Unit 108. Before the war, WWII had been a mathematics professor at the University of Warsaw, a specialist in statistical pattern recognition. Now, wearing a tattered coat once trimmed with academic velvet, he served as the group's leader. To his left, Irina Edelstein, formerly a radio technician for Polish intelligence, adjusted the dials of a salvaged Wehrmacht shortwave set hidden in a false chimney. Every night, Irina tuned in to the faint pulse of encrypted German field transmissions echoing across occupied Europe. Her skill was unmatched. She could isolate a Luftwaffe communique buried beneath static, artillery interference, and even music broadcasts. Unit 108's work had begun in secret months after the ghetto walls were sealed in. When the Nazis discovered remnants of the pre-war Polish cipher bureau still alive within Warsaw, they executed most of them. David survived by feigning madness and disappearing into the anonymous gray of the ghetto. But the mission lived on. Through coded letters slipped in loaves of bread smuggled by Polish Catholic couriers, and through a chain of children trained as messengers, the unit maintained contact with the Home Army and the British Special Operations Executive. Their goal was as dangerous as it was vital: to break modified Wehrmacht tactical ciphers that British intelligence struggled to interpret in real time. They worked by candlelight under the constant threat of Nazi patrols, typhus outbreaks, and starvation. Their tools were rudimentary: graph paper, fragments of broken radios, and their minds sharpened by desperation. David called it calculated defiance. On the night of February 3, 1943, Irina intercepted something different. A burst of numbers shorter than usual, with a strange symmetry. It was not a standard military transmission. After several hours of analysis, they realized it was a schedule for troop movements in Warsaw's southern districts, including Czerniaków. The message included dates, locations, and, most chillingly, references to processing centers. "It's a liquidation order," whispered Julek, the youngest member at 16, his face pale with horror. "They're going to empty the ghetto." David slammed his hand on the table. "Then we must sound the alarm." They encoded the data into a message for the Polish Home Army and concealed it in a prayer book with pages hollowed out to hide microfilm. Julek was tasked with delivering it across the wall via the sewer tunnels. Before he descended into the dark, David grasped his shoulder. "You are the last hope for tens of thousands. Don't let fear freeze your feet." The message reached the Polish resistance, who in turn broadcast it through the British SOE relay in London. Within days, Allied analysts connected Unit 108's intelligence with a pattern of prior exterminations in Krakow and Lublin. The report sparked debate among Allied command, but more crucially, they prompted the Polish underground to begin arming small cells inside the ghetto. By April, rumors of mass deportations ran rampant. The people were afraid, yet a spark had been lit. That spark ignited the Warsaw Ghetto uprising on April 19, 1943. In the chaos that followed, Unit 108 continued working from beneath a destroyed synagogue. They passed intelligence on troop deployments, weak points in the German cordon, and resistance needs, everything encoded through makeshift radios and semaphore signals from rooftops. They no longer hid behind walls, they were part of the resistance now. On April 27, as flames devoured the buildings around them, the Germans discovered Unit 108's location. Machine gun fire tore through the alley as black-uniformed SS troops advanced. David ordered the group to scatter. Irina stayed behind to burn the codes and destroy the radio. Only one member of Unit 108 escaped, Sophia Lichtman, who fled through the sewer system after burying a satchel of documents inside a broken stone angel at the Jewish cemetery. Decades later, in 1974, a Warsaw construction crew unearthed the satchel during cemetery restoration. Inside were notes, intercepted German messages, cipher keys, and a small strip of film containing one last encoded transmission. When decrypted by surviving veterans of the British code-breaking service, it revealed a variation of the Enigma key used by a panzer division slated for transfer to Normandy. British historians later concluded that knowledge of the cipher variant allowed Bletchley Park to crack key messages in May 1944, messages that enabled Allied planners to redirect air support and deceive German forces about the true location of the D-Day landings. In the official records, it was listed simply as Source, Warsaw Cell, Status Unknown. Today, at the Polin Museum of the History of Polish Jews, there is a small room tucked into a lower gallery. On its walls are faded pages covered in pencil marks, frequency notations, and mathematical equations. A replica of Irina's salvaged radio sits beneath a pane of glass, silent now but once alive with defiance. No monument bears their names, but history remembers the message they sent. Kenji Morimoto stood motionless beneath the rising sun flag fluttering atop the Imperial Palace in Tokyo, his stomach twisted in knots. It was July 20, 1945. The tide of war had turned, and even the emperor's most loyal subjects could feel the collapse coming. Cities lay in ruins, the skies no longer belonged to the empire, and whispers of defeat echoed in every alley. But the mission he had just been entrusted with was not one of surrender. It was one of hope. Inside a sealed envelope tucked into a silk pouch, Kenji carried a personal letter from Emperor Hirohito himself, written in delicate kanji and marked with the imperial seal. Its content, though never revealed to him in full, was known by its intent: to open a backchannel to the Soviet Union through their diplomatic mission in Stockholm, offering conditional peace. The plan was desperate. The Japanese leadership still clung to the illusion of Soviet neutrality, unaware that Stalin had already promised Roosevelt and Churchill to join the war against Japan. But Hirohito, increasingly isolated and disturbed by the suffering of his people, sought an alternative to full-scale invasion or unconditional surrender. Kenji, a 24-year-old linguist with a perfect memory and an unblemished record, was to be the messenger. His journey began on a freighter disguised as a Red Cross supply ship, departing from Kobe under the cover of darkness. With forged documents identifying him as a medical translator, Kenji boarded the vessel alongside European aid workers and neutral observers. In the belly of the ship, concealed inside a hollowed-out medical chest, was the pouch with the Emperor's letter. As they passed through the South China Sea, an American submarine briefly shadowed them before veering away. Kenji did not sleep that night. He sat clutching a rosary given to him by his Catholic grandmother, an oddity in his Shinto household, but one he had kept ever since her quiet arrest in 1943 for un-Japanese behavior. He believed in neither gods nor emperors, but he believed in silence and duty. The freighter docked in Portuguese-controlled Goa, where Kenji boarded a small plane bound for Cairo under the guise of transferring war-injured civilians. From there, a circuitous rail journey took him through Alexandria, Istanbul, and Bucharest before reaching neutral Sweden. Throughout the entire route, he passed through war zones, heard rumors of firebombings in Tokyo, and watched refugee trains packed with the dying. He saw the faces of children scorched by napalm and mothers whispering lullabies in burned-out stations. Kenji did not cry, but he began to understand. In Stockholm, he checked into a modest hotel under the alias Yamato Yoshida. That night, he prepared the letter for delivery, carefully inspecting the silk pouch, smoothing its creases, and rehearsing the formal Japanese phrases he would use. The Soviet consulate lay in a gray stone building near the edge of the diplomatic quarter, behind iron gates and guarded by 2 indifferent sentries. But before Kenji could step outside, everything changed. On the morning of August 6th, a Swedish newspaper was slipped under his door. The headline screamed in black ink, "New weapon destroys Japanese city." Hiroshima had vanished beneath a blinding flash. Kenji dropped the paper and fell to the floor. 4 hours, he sat motionless, his hands trembling. The word atomic meant nothing to him then. But the black and white photo, a mushroom cloud rising from the earth, spoke of death on a scale he couldn't fathom. He knew in that instant that the Emperor's letter no longer mattered. 3 days later, Nagasaki followed. Kenji never delivered the message. He burned the pouch in a quiet park near the Baltic Sea and sent a single telegram to his handlers in Tokyo, task unfulfilled. Circumstances changed. Await instructions. None ever came. On August 15th, Hirohito's voice echoed across Japan for the first time in history. Crackling through radios in shattered homes and air raid shelters, his words declared the end of the war. Kenji listened from a Swedish cafe, surrounded by diplomats and exiles, tears running down his face not from joy or sorrow, but from sheer, overwhelming exhaustion. He never returned to Japan. In 1952, under a new name, he moved to Canada, married a Norwegian nurse, and taught Japanese literature at a small university in British Columbia. For decades, he told no one of his mission, not even his wife. It wasn't until the late 1980s, after a diagnosis of terminal lung cancer, that he sent a letter to the Japanese government requesting access to the Imperial Archives. The letter was denied. But one file, declassified in 2001 by the CIA, revealed a partial record of the mission. Codenamed Operation Chrysanthemum, the document confirmed that Hirohito had authorized a personal emissary to attempt peace overtures via the Soviet embassy in Stockholm. It noted the identity of the courier as Kenji M., and speculated, incorrectly, that he had been killed en route. A footnote speculated that the failure of the message to reach Moscow had no measurable impact on the timing of the war's end. But history is not only made of measurable impacts. In a box of Kenji's belongings discovered after his death in 1992, a small burnt edge of the imperial seal was found, folded into a page torn from a Japanese grammar textbook. On it, Kenji had written a single line in perfect calligraphy: "The voice of an emperor cannot outpace the silence of a bomb." The desert winds howled across the scorched dunes of western Egypt, carrying with them the echoes of tank treads, the crack of distant artillery, and a name few remember today, the Wadi sisters. Neither sisters by blood nor by name, they were a loose collective of Bedouin women, smugglers, widows, shepherds, and exiles, who used the cover of the endless Sahara to fight a war that history forgot. In 1942, the Allied and Axis powers clashed violently in North Africa. The British Eighth Army, under General Bernard Montgomery, was dug in near El Alamein, holding the line against Erwin Rommel's feared Afrika Korps. Sandstorms cloaked ambushes. Mines devoured men and machines. Supplies were scarce. Every drop of water, every gallon of fuel, every scrap of intelligence could tip the balance. That's where they came in. The leader of the Wadi sisters was a woman named Aisha al-Hadid. She was once married to an Italian merchant in Benghazi, fluent in both Italian and German from her years of trade. After his execution by fascist officers for aiding Jewish refugees, Aisha vanished into the sands. When she returned, it was not to grieve, but to resist. Under her command, the sisters began as a network of guides for lost Allied patrols. But their operations quickly evolved. By mapping secret desert passes, smuggling messages between British forward units, and even conducting sabotage on Axis fuel depots disguised as goat herders, they became a ghostly presence the Germans could never pin down. British intelligence initially dismissed reports of an all-female desert resistance as myth or morale fiction. But after a failed German flanking maneuver in late August, one intercepted and redirected thanks to a coded message tied to a hawk released by the sisters, Montgomery ordered official contact. Captain Thomas Blake of the Long Range Desert Group was assigned to coordinate with Aisha. His diary, recovered in 1963, recounted their first meeting. She wore robes dyed in sand and coal, her rifle across her back like a shepherd's staff. When I asked why she fought, she told me, "Because war came to my land without asking. And I will not have men write its end without me." The Wadi sisters operated in complete autonomy, navigating by stars, memory, and instinct. They maintained caches of weapons hidden in hollowed rocks, used coded songs sung over desert winds to communicate between camps, and recruited other women from oppressed tribes who had lost sons, brothers, or husbands to the invaders. Their most daring mission came in the early hours of October 21, 1942, 3 days before the Second Battle of El Alamein began. Allied command had discovered a new Axis fuel line stretching through a recently seized oasis, protected by Italian armored divisions. But reconnaissance had failed to confirm the fuel's exact location. Aisha offered to lead a small team into the Italian camp under the guise of Bedouin traders seeking water. Hidden within their wares were explosive charges disguised as spice sacks. That night, under a moonless sky, they crept into the heart of the oasis and placed the charges beneath fuel tanks marked with the Black Eagle of the Luftwaffe. The explosions lit up the desert for miles. The resulting firestorm disrupted Rommel's resupply schedule, forcing his panzers to operate at half capacity during the critical first phase of the battle. Montgomery's forces seized the initiative, pushing the Axis back and marking the beginning of the end of Nazi influence in North Africa. But success came at a cost. 2 of the sisters, Sanaa and Dalila, were captured during the retreat. They were interrogated by the Italians for days before being executed. Their final words, according to an intercepted report, were, "We are not ghosts. We are fire." After the battle, Aisha and her remaining fighters melted back into the desert. When Captain Blake attempted to locate them again in early 1943, all he found were empty shelters and stone circles marking graves. No one knew where they went. Some claimed they had joined the Free French forces in Tunisia. Others whispered they had returned to their tribes, refusing medals and honors, as the war was never theirs to profit from. In 1951, a letter arrived at the British War Office, written in Arabic and bearing no return address. It read, "Tell the General, we fought not for kings or maps, but for the silence between gunfire. When the world forgets, the sand will remember." The letter was filed away and forgotten. Decades passed. The official histories of El Alamein praised Montgomery's tactics, the valor of Australian infantry, and the power of British tanks. The name Wadi Sisters appeared only in passing footnotes, often dismissed as local legend. But in 1997, during excavation for a new road near the Katara Depression, workers unearthed a series of stone cairns. Inside were bones, cloth fragments, and a rusted British service revolver engraved with the initials TB alongside it. Buried in a clay jar were small slips of parchment marked with route coordinates, troop formations, and coded tribal symbols. Historians now believe this was a forgotten Wadi Sisters cache, possibly a field base. The findings triggered a re-evaluation of Bedouin participation in the North African campaign. Memorials began appearing in scattered places, none grand, but all etched in sand-colored stone. And in a remote corner of the Imperial War Museum in London, tucked beside maps of El Alamein, sits a plaque with an inscription in Arabic and English. Asterisk to the women who knew the desert better than any general. You fought unseen, but never unfelt. Asterisk. In the velvet-draped opera houses of Nazi-occupied Paris, her voice could stop a room. Céline Marchand, once France's most beloved soprano, was a star reborn under occupation. Her haunting renditions of Verdi and Debussy echoed through the gilded balconies of the Palais Garnier, where Wehrmacht officers and Gestapo officials sat entranced. But beneath the silk gowns and standing ovations, Céline was more than a performer. She was an instrument of war. The world knew her as La Voix de Minuit, the Midnight Voice. London knew her as SOE Agent Cassandra, 12. Before the war, Céline had been an icon of Parisian culture, famous for her fiery stage presence and scandalous affairs. But when German tanks rolled into the city in June 1940, she disappeared from public life. Many assumed she had fled. In truth, she had joined the underground. Her recruitment by the Special Operations Executive came through a British conductor-turned-intelligence officer named Edward Sloan, who had once accompanied her in Covent Garden. Sloan saw beyond her fame. She was multilingual, fiercely intelligent, and above all, fearless. By 1942, she had returned to the public eye as a collaborator in the eyes of many. Her critics called her a traitor for accepting Nazi invitations to perform, but none knew the truth, that each aria masked coded messages, each curtain call a transmission opportunity. So handlers devised an ingenious cipher. Celine would encode intelligence gathered at Nazi banquets into the structure of her performances. A slightly extended pause in the second verse might mean a convoy movement. A raised note in a forbidden key might indicate a new commander's arrival. Every element of her artistry became part of a living code. She dined with generals. She flirted with SS officers. And she listened, always listening. In grand salons over expensive brandy, secrets spilled freely, especially from men eager to impress a beautiful woman. In one notable performance at the Théâtre de Champs-Élysées in March 1943, she altered the tempo of Bizet's Carmen during the famous habanera. The shift was subtle, but to trained ears in London, it revealed critical details. German units near Calais were being repositioned westward. The message was passed through a resistance courier posing as her costume assistant, and 3 days later, RAF bombers hit the vulnerable convoys. Her most dangerous act came in April 1944, just weeks before Operation Overlord. High-ranking officers in the German 15th Army were stationed in Paris to oversee northern coastal defenses. During a reception held in her honor at the Hotel Lutetia, she overheard 2 colonels discussing minefield realignments and falsified beach fortifications, part of a wider German effort to disguise the Atlantic Wall's weaknesses. Knowing the information was crucial, Celine took a desperate risk. That night, she delivered an encore, a haunting solo rendition of Fores Pi Jesu, in which she broke from the written melody 3 times in what appeared to be emotional flourishes. But each break corresponded to the Morse-coded phrase, Omaha Week Center, June. The recording of the concert, transmitted by BBC Radio to London, was dissected by analysts and forwarded to Eisenhower's staff. Allied command shifted additional naval support to Omaha Beach accordingly. But success could not protect her forever. On May 9, 1944, a resistance safehouse near Montmartre was raided. Under torture, a captured courier revealed fragments of the Songbird operation. The Gestapo quickly closed in. Celine was arrested the next day, moments after stepping off stage in Marseille, her final note still lingering in the rafters. For 17 days, she was held in the Fraines prison south of Paris. She was interrogated, beaten, deprived of sleep. But she never broke. Her identity as Cassandra, 12, remained buried beneath her silence. Then, without warning, she was released. Historians later learned the truth. An SS colonel, enchanted by her performances, had intervened, declaring her too valuable for morale purposes. The colonel's name would later appear on a list of war criminals tried at Nuremberg. Celine never spoke of him. After the liberation of Paris in August 1944, she appeared on stage once more, this time in a tattered dress, standing atop the balcony of the Palais de Chaillot. Before a crowd of thousands and Allied soldiers marching through the city, she sang the Marseillaise, her voice hoarse, her eyes rimmed with tears. She vanished soon after. Rumors flew for decades. Some said she joined the French resistance fighters in Alsace. Others claimed she fled to Argentina. But in 1971, an aging nurse in Devon, England, wrote a letter to the BBC. In it, she described treating a mute French woman in a rural sanatorium for several years during the 1950s, a woman who would sometimes hum operatic melodies late into the night, tears falling silently onto her pillow. In 1999, British archives declassified portions of SOE's Operation Songbird files. Included was a single photograph, Celine Marchand, hair shorn, draped in a grey shawl, standing on a London airfield beside Edward Sloan. The date, August 30, 1944. The final note in the file reads, Agent Cassandra, 12, exfiltrated safely. Physical recovery incomplete. Psychological trauma significant. No further missions authorized. Her voice saved lives. May she find peace in silence. Today, at the Opéra Garnier, a small plaque near the backstage staircase bears her name. It does not mention espionage or war. It simply reads, Celine Marchand, La Voix de Minuit, 1911, unknown, she sang so others could speak. In the waning days of the Second World War, as Berlin burned and the Reich crumbled into ash, a single U-boat slipped silently from the Norwegian port of Bergen. Its hull bore the number U-977. Its destination was not combat, nor surrender, but exile. The captain, Oberleutnant Heinz Adler, was just 29. A seasoned submariner, he had commanded escort missions through the North Atlantic gauntlet of Allied sonar and aerial patrols. But this final mission was unlike any he had faced. He carried no torpedoes, no operational orders from Donitz. What he carried, sealed in steel crates bolted into the forward torpedo compartment, was labeled Kriegsserb, War Legacy. The crew had no idea what it meant. Rumors circled beneath the oppressive hum of the engines. Nazi gold, priceless paintings, blueprints for a secret weapon, or even Hitler's frozen remains. Adler said nothing. Only one man knew the truth. His name was Dr. Victor Kessler, a physicist whose work had been abruptly transferred from Piemont to a secret Bavarian lab in 1944. He was quiet, pale, and constantly scribbling equations on scraps of paper. He rarely spoke, except to warn the sailors not to disturb the crates, especially the one marked with a radiation symbol few of them understood. As Germany collapsed, Adler received a final communiqué from Admiral Karl Donitz himself. This war is over. But Germany's future may yet survive. Preserve what you carry. Await further orders. Sail south. On May 10, 1945, 5 days after Germany's official surrender, U-977 submerged and vanished into the deep. The plan was bold and desperate: to reach Argentina, a nation sympathetic to former Axis powers, by traveling submerged across the Atlantic using the U-boat's Schnorchel device. It would take more than 2 months underwater, an endurance test few vessels had ever attempted. Conditions quickly deteriorated. Fresh food rotted, tempers frayed, and the oxygen scrubbers strained. Men grew gaunt and paranoid. They whispered of ghosts in the engine room, of the strange humming sound that sometimes emanated from the crates. Kessler offered no comfort. Some claimed he was continuing experiments below deck. One sailor, Otto Meyer, reported seeing him wearing heavy gloves and goggles, working by candlelight over a spherical metal device that glowed faintly blue. On the 43rd day, sailor Ernst Weber began convulsing and foaming at the mouth. He died within hours. The crew buried him at sea, but suspicions ran wild. Several claimed radiation sickness. Others believed Kessler had poisoned him. A fight broke out. Guns were drawn. Adler, desperate to maintain order, confined Kessler to the captain's quarters and posted a guard outside. But the crew had already split into factions, those loyal to Adler's authority and those who believed they were all being sacrificed for some mad Nazi experiment. On day 56, U-977 surfaced off the coast of Uruguay for air and water. A British aircraft spotted them and broadcast their location. Rather than surrender, Adler submerged again and ordered a detour toward the icy southern edge of the continent. He had made a decision: the cargo would never fall into Allied hands. In the early hours of July 17, U-977 reached the edge of the Antarctic convergence, where frigid waters churned and icebergs drifted like sleeping giants. Sonar detected deep crevasses beneath the sea floor. It was here Adler planned to fulfill his final orders, if not to deliver the war legacy, then to bury it forever. He logged one final entry in the ship's journal: Germany is gone. Let history dig for our bones. We are the last sentence of a dying chapter. No official trace of U-977 was ever found. But in 1998, a commercial diving team off the coast of Patagonia, searching for sunken treasure ships, encountered a sonar anomaly 300 meters below the surface. The shape was unmistakable: a World War II-era U-boat wedged between submerged rock faces. Though partially collapsed, the conning tower still bore the ghostly imprint of the Reichsadler. The Argentinian government sealed the site within days. Access was restricted. The divers were silenced under national security claims. But leaked footage surfaced years later. It showed the dive team recovering a steel case from the wreck, its hinges fused by corrosion, its markings still legible in Gothic script: Project Morgenstern. The contents have never been disclosed. CIA analysts speculated that Project Morgenstern may have been an early prototype of a directional atomic warhead, or perhaps a failed Nazi attempt at portable nuclear propulsion. Other theories suggest it was a navigation device, based on early quantum theory, that could locate Allied convoys with uncanny precision. The truth remains buried in ice and shadow. Today, U-977 exists more as myth than fact. Conspiracy theorists claim survivors reached a hidden base in Antarctica. Some believe Kessler continued his research in secret. Others assert the entire story was a smokescreen for Allied efforts to recover German technology during Operation Paperclip. But inside the German naval archives in Bremerhaven, a single page survives from a post-war debrief. It records an intercepted Argentine naval transmission dated August 18, 1945. Unidentified submerged object sighted southwest of Tierra del Fuego. Emitted mechanical signal in Morse. One word only. Vergessen. Forgotten. No further transmissions were received. The ocean, like history, buried the rest. Some truths die in silence. Others are silenced by design. The stories you've just heard were nearly lost forever, scrubbed from memory, buried under politics, shame, and fear. But history has a way of clawing its way back. If these secrets stayed hidden for this long, what else is still locked away?